Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. My name is David Waybright, and we're here to talk about Last Friday, and with me, as always, is the one, the only Drakkenstrike, Jeremy Salinas.
Hello, everyone. I am super excited to talk about this one. I am a huge deduction board gamer. I love these style of games. Very much in the same vein as Fury of Dracula, Letters from Whitechapel, Spec Ops, all three games I try to get you and Gary to play all the time, and I keep getting denied. Although we did get a really good game of Fury of Dracula, although I left you guys behind. You guys could never find me the entire time. This one shares a lot of the same aspects of Letters from Whitechapel. Just by the sheer look of the board itself.
It definitely looks a lot like it.
It shares a lot of the same characteristics. But let's get into the nuts and bolts of it first. It is a brand new game by Ares Games. Is a 2 to 5 player game. For those that haven't played this style of game before, you really do need as many players as possible.
Yeah.
Although if you don't have the 5 players, one player can play the antagonist and the other player can play all 5 of the campers.
Yeah, and that could be, I haven't done that, but I could see that being fun as well.
So the theme of the game is it revolves very much around the whole Friday the 13th type mythos, where a group of campers comes into a campsite. There is a killer on the loose who is trying to kill them over the course of the game. And like I said before, it shares some of the same aspects of Letters from Whitechapel, but it does it in a much, much different way, in the way that it organizes the chapters or segments of the game.
Yeah, the structure of the game is completely different. I've only played Fury. I played Letters a long time ago. Mm-hmm. But the one of the biggest differences that I feel right from the get-go is the scale of the game, the scale of the map.
Yeah.
You know, you have Letters of Whitechapel, you've got all of Victorian London, basically.
Right.
Fury is all of Europe. Mm-hmm. This is a camp.
Right.
So what I felt this did for the game was really bring the intensity up. Mm-hmm. You really feel like when you're being chased,
right,
as opposed to these longer distances. So it makes it a little bit more exciting when you know that when you're moving from dot to dot, it's really just several feet.
Right.
So that I think that's one of the key things that kind of brought me into the game.
Yeah.
And the theme as well. I mean, the theme of Friday the 13th and Last Friday is pretty fun.
So I'm very familiar with Letters from Whitechapel. I've played it a dozen or more times. And I know you guys want to know what the differences are in this, because when you look at it, once again, it has a lot of key characteristics to that game. So in Letters from Whitechapel, you're basically Jack the Ripper. You create a base for yourself somewhere on the map, and that's a place you'll always go back to at the end of the day. You're going out there, you're killing someone, you're coming back. This one is a little bit different. At the start of the game, you're going to have 5 campers that are nestled around this lake. And underneath these campsites that you see here, there are keys to cabins, right? That the players are going to try to get into, which are safe places for them. And the reason why they're safe is because they have light on them.
Yeah.
And any time that the killer moves into these areas, they have to reveal themselves, right? So there is no key location that... We're just going to call the antagonist Jason, right? I don't remember what his name is in here.
I don't. It's probably just the killer.
Yeah,
they're probably trying to stay away from
the Maniac.
Okay, the Maniac.
Right. So there's no key base that he's trying to get into or get back to at the end of the day. He's strictly trying to go out there and kill as many people as he can during a round. There are 4 rounds, or 4 chapters, we should call them, in the game, and each chapter has 15 different rounds in it, and that's denoted by this machete on the bottom of the game.
That is a cool feature. We actually got about halfway through our first game before we all realized, oh,
that's a machete.
That's a machete.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
So the game structure works like this. Each of the players, or the campers in the game, are going to take a turn, and that's basically moving or interacting with something on the board.
Right.
And they go in the turn order of the machete down here on the bottom. And then the antagonist is going to have a move. The campers move along these white dots that you see here, and they're allowed to move up to 2 spaces per turn. So, for instance, the red player could go boom, boom, or in any direction that he so wishes to go. The antagonist, or the Maniac, only moves from numbered areas to numbered areas, and that's just one move. Anytime that he passes over somebody, he kills that player and leaves a corpse. Corpse are these little tokens that you see here, and they block the ability of players to move through them. It's kind of like in a scary movie. You see a corpse, you're like, ah!
Exactly.
And you start running the other way,
you can also find some of those under the tents. So the campers at first are looking for those keys, But just like one of those movies, you might walk into a tent looking for a key, and there's a dead body.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's cool because at the end of each of these rounds, or 15 rounds in a section, what you're doing is you're comparing the number of corpses to the number of survivors. And what that does is it allows the Maniac either to gain bonus actions, which are these little tokens I have over here, and I'll throw these under the camera too. There's 5 basic actions or extra actions that the Maniac can take. Double moving, invisibility, so if he ever needs to reveal himself, he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
The axe, which will allow him to permanently destroy one of these cabins. So this is a cabin that's been opened up by a camper.
Right.
On the flip side, it is a destroyed cabin that adds a secret passage for the Maniac to go into another cabin.
This is one of the coolest features that a lot of those other games don't have.
Right.
These cabins, there's these cabin locations around the board. And like we said, the campers are trying to get to those cabins first, or as quickly as possible, at least a couple of them. Turn the lights on, open the cabin. It's a safe haven, if you will, because when the lights are surrounding it, you'll see the Maniac when he enters that area. On the flip side, the Maniac can go around and not only destroy those safe havens, but it also opens that secret passage up, which is gigantic.
Yeah.
Because if you have one cabin on one side of the board and one on the other side of the board with a secret passage, it opens up a massive amount of movement opportunity for the Maniac.
Yeah, and to be noted, these tokens that the Maniac can use are only usable once per round. Once he uses them, he places them on the time track on the bottom to denote which round he used them in. However, again, going back to the end of the round actions, if there are more corpses on there than survivors, he can take some of those back into his possession.
Right.
So in the second chapter, he can break down another, or he can become invisible again, or this one, which allows you to take this one, which is called Plot Twist, which allows you to take a 16th action at the end of the round.
Which burnt us in our first play.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Gary got killed by the Maniac on the technically after the 15th round. The Maniac took an extra turn and killed our killed our Predestined. And to talk about Predestined, we need to talk about the chapters in the game, because this is what really makes the game very unique in comparison to Letters from Whitechapel. There are 4 chapters in the game. The first one is entitled Arriving at the Camp, and this is when all the players arrive technically around the lake and are trying to find the keys to these cabins.
And the Maniac's going after them.
He's hunting. He's in hunt mode.
When we described earlier when the Maniac passes through a camper and they get killed, that's chapter 1.
Yes.
Now that all changes in chapter 2.
Right. Chapter 2 is called The Chase, and this is technically the daytime.
Right.
And this is
next
when
day.
the Maniac is running away from the campers, because the campers have the opportunity, if they pass through the Maniac, to kill him, basically.
Yeah, they basically find him and he gets, you see his location.
Right, but that doesn't kill him, just like in a typical, horror movie. It doesn't kill him. He comes back, always in chapter 3, and whoever killed him becomes the Predestined.
Right.
Chapter 3 is called The Massacre. And it's at this point that 2 things can happen. If the
Predestined?
If the Predestined is killed by the Maniac, that ends the game.
Yeah, the Maniac wins, but he has to kill the Predestined only.
Right.
In the first chapter, I think if he killed all the campers, he would win.
Yeah. So what is a Predestined? Predestined is either one of 2 things. It's the person in chapter 2 who passed through the Maniac and discovered him, or it's the person at the end of chapter 2, whoever's the closest to that. And it's just represented by that player. Like, say, for instance, it was red. In the box, there is a white token, and that white token becomes the Predestined player. So in chapter 4, it's called the final chapter. Mm-hmm. And this, once again, is the time when the campers can fight back. If at any time that Predestined player, the white player at that point, goes through the Maniac, that ends the game.
Right, and the campers are going after the Maniac again, but at the same time, they have the extra goal of having to protect the Predestined.
Right.
So trying to turtle him up in a cabin or something like that, or not.
and this is one of the really, really cool aspects of the game, is because in the first chapter, you're being hunted. So you're trying to get as far away from the Maniac as you can. However, if the Maniac gets too close to you at the end of the chapter, they're going to be that much closer to
Right.
you as you're hunting them in Chapter 2. Because everything on the board stays where it was. And that's one of the coolest aspects of the game. It's like almost like a campaign mode,
Yeah.
where it's a give and take. You're going after one person, then they're coming back after you, and you kind of get this ebb and flow of where the Maniac might be.
Well, yeah, in Chapter 2, in our first play, Chapter 2 is where it got really exciting for the campers. And it's really the big differentiator with this game is because it basically flip-flops the roles.
Right.
Whereas in something like Whitechapel or Fury, the people who are hunting can get tired of hunting, you know, especially if they're not finding anything. And in this one, it kind of switches it up so everyone has the sort of enjoyment of going after each other. And in our first game, we were really cornering him. And then back to this board, there's so many dots on this board. We were certain that he was in one of two spots, and then he revealed himself like what felt like 5 spots away, but we had just failed to see one long line between two numbers that he took to sneak out away from us.
So there's 2 other things I wanted to talk about in this game. One is the aspect of moving the Maniac, which again is different in this than it is in Letters from Whitechapel. You'll notice on this time track there are red splotches along the bottom here. Those are reveal times that the Maniac has to tell the players where he was 3 turns ago. And that's represented by this screen that the Maniac uses. And unfortunately, this was printed backwards or cut backwards on these first several copies that was released.
It's still workable, but it was slightly confusing.
Yeah, but follow me here. At the very beginning of the game, he's going to denote where he starts the game. And then every 3 turns, he has to tell the players where he was 3 turns ago. So that's one of the aspects on where the campers can have an idea on where he is. So how did the campers fight back? That's done by the clue system in the game. Anytime that the Maniac is revealed, or every 3 turns, he drops a clue on the board on where he is located. So for instance, say 3 turns ago he was on 79. He has to take one of these clue tokens and lay it on an adjacent white circle around him. These clue tokens allow the campers to do a myriad of different things. They can hear around them to see if he's been in that or is in that location. They can trap him with a trap. They can have double movement by getting a cool clue,
which is a great ability to move a little further.
And they can dig up or bury corpses.
Yeah, we didn't say that earlier, but when you do find a corpse, it blocks the passage until you use a shovel to bury it and get it out of the way.
Which is what you want to do anyway, because by the end of the round, you're getting more clues on the camper side if there are more survivors than there are corpses on the board.
And the last thing is the lanterns on here. And the lanterns, I can't stress enough how important the lanterns are.
Yeah.
Because when you set a lantern down, it provides light in all of the numbered spaces adjacent to that lantern.
Yes.
So now you've basically, kind of like the cabin, you've got these lit up spots that when the Maniac, when the Maniac passes through, he has to reveal himself. So you can set up kind of like little intricate webs just to, if nothing else, to restrict his movement.
Yeah.
So he can choose to go through there, but he's going to be revealing himself.
Yes.
He's going to be putting down another clue token.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really great mechanic, and we couldn't find enough lanterns. Those were our favorite, probably.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention was when a camper dies, each of these colored tokens have 3 campers that are associated with them. So, for instance, yellow has 3 characters. When a character dies, they are removed from the game, and there are just that many less campers to use in that round. However, campers will respawn with a new character down at this bus on the bottom left corner. So Jason, or the Maniac, once again, can just kind of camp out down here and start killing people if he so wishes as they're coming off the bus, which is, again, is a really cool aspect because it forces him to go that route instead of going up here where the campers are trying to do other aspects.
Right. There's, like you said, the ebb and flow. There's a reason to do this, but there's reason to go do that all the time in the game. So if he's down here killing people as they spawn, which isn't a huge opportunity or problem in the game,
right?
All the other campers could be up there picking up every clue that he's dropped to date, and those clues are huge. You don't want to let, if you're the Maniac, you don't want to let the campers pick up a bunch of clues because it really powers them up.
So David, you're not a huge deduction style game. What do you think about Last Friday?
Well, I really like this for all the reasons that we just said. The feedback loop in terms of when you're learning where the Maniac is more frequent. It just happens. It doesn't rely only on the players. I mean, when I played Fury, it just felt like if we had no idea where Dracula was, we were just spending the entire game wondering.
Yeah, the trail system on there is less obvious than this game.
Whitechapel has a little bit more of a trail system.
It does, yeah, a clue system built in once the.
But this one has it. This one has it in spades. I mean, even if you're not doing well and you're not finding him, every 3 turns you're going to get some information.
You're getting constant feedback from the game on where he may be and where to avoid and where to
exactly.
go to.
And his movement isn't, as long as you pay attention to the board, his movement isn't so drastic that he won't. He can't be terribly far away from that spot.
Right.
That, like I said, the scale really brings up the theme. When you're playing this game, you really feel a more, oh my gosh, intensity than I think you do in Fury of Dracula, just because it seems so large scale in that game.
Yeah.
I like the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll play this game. I don't know that I might even try those other games again sometime, but this would definitely be the one. It'd be hard for me to want to play one of those other games if we had Last Friday as a possibility.
Yeah, this is a huge conundrum for me because I love Fury of Dracula and I love Letters from Whitechapel, and now there is this. So Halloween, I don't know what game to play anymore. I can tell you guys this. They're all completely unique in the way that they play. I love the aspect of Letters from Whitechapel of creating a base, going out doing something, and then having to come back to that base. That is a really cool aspect of that game, and it's something that will always draw me back. Fury of Dracula, just the theme alone, and the aspect of being Dracula and hiding and leaving a trail behind you of vampires is a really fun portion of the game for me. And now we have Last Friday, and I gotta tell you guys, this is a incredibly well-made game. The chapter system in this is very, very thematic of what it would typically be like in a Friday the 13th movies, which is what it's modeled after, right? The mechanics in the game are really, really solid. The aspects of having corpses, having lanterns, having traps for Jason, or the Maniac once again, and then just the turn structure and these cabins and how they work and how they're such a vital portion of the game. Getting these earlier, taking that extra difficult route, knowing where he may be, but trying to get to the cabin to open it up, because if he opens it, you guys are going to be in deep trouble if he gets 2 of these open on the board at the same time, especially on opposite sides of the board, because then he has the ability to fast travel between locations. It's just highly, highly thematic.
Yeah, super thematic. Those cabins, and again, like we said earlier, we haven't touched on here at the end, the flip-flop of the roles, where things change per chapter, is easily the most defining characteristic of this game, I think.
And then the multiple different in-game conditions is really cool. So, I mean, it's thematic. It opens up a lot of different gameplay. It takes that Letters from Whitechapel system and really makes it a completely different style game. Now, the only negative I would say about the game is the artwork isn't... The board is fantastic.
The artwork on the board is perfect.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't change the board at all.
Right.
Even the iconography is decent on the tokens. The art, and I'm thinking they did this consciously, but the artwork on the cards, as you can see here, is different.
Yeah, they went with the Polaroid aspect, which is really cool. But the artwork
I like the
is
theme, but the artwork itself looks a little
amateurish,
like B-movie-ish, and maybe that's what they were going for.
It could be,
because it has that sort of vibe. It's even different than the box art.
Yeah, my
only
concern is that if they had given this a proper treatment with better art, a better cover, and maybe even different pawns than what's in Letters from
thematic
Whitechapel,
pawns,
miniatures, I think that would have drawn in a much larger audience of people that said, wow, look at this. Look at the presentation in this game. It may draw us into playing it. However, saying that this is a fantastic game, I would definitely... Yeah, we are nitpicking. I would definitely go out... If you at all enjoy Fury of Dracula or Letters from Whitechapel or Spec Ops or any of these style of deduction games, instant buy, absolutely. Anything else?
No, I'd say, too, though, that even if you aren't fans of those games, you got to give this a try. Yeah. I was not a fan of those types of games. I like deduction. I like the concept of hidden movement, but I've never enjoyed those games because they drag on a little bit long for my tastes. This one went fast, and the theme really drew me in.
And it was enjoyable to play from both the campers and the
Yeah.
Maniac perspective,
Yeah,
which
that's-
is maybe a little bit different in Fury. I think the enjoyment of Fury is playing Dracula.
Well, and Whitechapel too, probably.
Letters from Whitechapel. I enjoy that net
Both.
system of trying to find them and starting to make that net on where he is located in the border, where his hideout is. So anyway, guys, nitpicking about little things. Fantastic game. Go check it out. I am Jeremy Salinas,
I'm David Waybright.
and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.